But you know what it really is. It's the classic playbook of power, as timeless as the crown itself. When a sensitive operation is complete, you clean house. You eliminate the witnesses and you burn the records. It's the same brutal logic that will echo for centuries in the quiet, lethal work of spies and assassins. They needed the world to remember a mad king, not a murdered one. A man cursed by God, not a man slowly poisoned by his enemies. That night, you are sent to his empty chambers, and just as that terrible understanding passes between you, the hinges on the great oak door behind you let out a low, agonizing groan as someone begins to push it open. That it contains knowledge passed down in secret from the ashes of the Knights Templar. Not about gold or holy relics, but about something far more valuable. A blueprint for how to build a state, a nation, free from the puppetry of Rome and the tyranny of feudalism. An idea of France that belongs to its people, not its warlords. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet cellar. You can almost feel the web of spies listening in the city above, their ears pressed to the floorboards of the world. But the truth has already arrived, carried on the breath of minstrels, in the coded gestures of traders, and in the fearful prayers of travelers. It spreads from village to village, a contagion of knowledge, faster than the plague. They think you are blind, but you are watching the conspiracy unfold from below, through the cracks in the floor of the world. You learn a lesson that will echo for 1,000 years. The official story is a gilded cage for the truth, meant to keep it contained and beautiful. The real story runs wild in the streets. What they don't want you to know is that a king's madness is not a tragedy. It is a tool. For the right hands, a monarch's personal hell can be forged into a political heaven. You are standing in the Cathedral of Notre Dame, but it is not the one from the postcards. The air is thick with the smell of beeswax, cold stone, and the damp wool of 1,000 unwashed bodies pressed together. It was a key turning a lock in his mind, revealing a terror so specific, so personal, that it couldn't have been random. They paid for his madness, but they got more than they bargained for. He wasn't just seeing demons. He was seeing a truth they had tried to bury, a secret that, if it ever shattered into the light, would destroy far more than just a single fragile king. But the real message, delivered in fire and the stench of death, is for the king's few remaining allies. We can touch anyone. We can burn the king's closest friends alive, right in front of him. We can even burn the king himself, and we will make it look like a game. The true horror wasn't the fire. The true horror is the cold, dawning realization that the king is a puppet, trapped in his own life. His existence is a performance, and his enemies are now directing the play. You saw the endless, meticulous records he kept, day after agonizing day, for 3 decades. His notes were a universe of forbidden knowledge. Every meal the king ate, every herb he was administered, every terrifying hallucination, every moment of shocking, unexpected lucidity. A complete clinical history of a royal mind's slow, systematic unraveling. And now he is gone, and with him his entire library. 99% of people will only remember the physician's name as a footnote, if they hear it at all. It is a detail lost to the official record, a convenient death that tidied up a messy reign. His obsession with maps wasn't a symptom of his madness. It was the last desperate act of a genius trying to solve the riddle of his own demise before it was complete. He was the only investigator working the case, but no one would listen to a madman. He suddenly stops. The scraping ceases. He lifts his head, and his gaze cuts through the shadows of the room, past the flickering candlelight, and seems to find you in the darkness of the hall. His eyes aren't mad. They are terrified. He knows, and he knows you know. 99% of people today, and 100% of people then, believe that power is a birthright, that the nobility and the church are the twin pillars holding up the world. The secret of the marmosets was that they knew this was a lie. They knew the pillars were rotten. On the table, next to the maps and ledgers, lies a book bound in scarred, unmarked leather. No one speaks of it directly, but you all know the rumor. You see it in the eyes of the merchant who just returned from a trip to the capital. He doesn't speak of it, but his hands do. When he thinks no one is looking, his right hand slithers through the air like a snake. His left clenches and unclenches, a hungry jaw. You see a pilgrim, his cloak caked with the dust of 100 leagues, trace a single wilting flower in the dirt with his staff before rubbing it out with his boot. The serpent, the wolf, the lily. No official decree has been made. No royal parchment read. The personal sigil of John the Fearless, the Duke of Burgundy. He knows everything. The science of the ergot fungus explains what it felt like. But the deepest, most terrifying secret isn't in the accounts or the chemical compounds. It's in the specific nature of the king's madness. Why did he believe he was made of glass, liable to shatter at the slightest touch? Why did he hunt his own knights through the halls, convinced they were assassins? The poison was meant to create chaos, but it seems to have unlocked something else entirely. As the flames illuminate the hall, reflecting in his wide eyes, you see it. It is not horror. It is not shock or grief. It is the faintest, quickest ghost of a smile, a tightening at the corner of his mouth that betrays a chilling satisfaction. In that instant, you understand. Accidents in the royal court are almost never accidents. They are messages. This is the medieval version of a black ops mission, hidden in plain sight, engineered with perfect, plausible deniability. A terrible tragedy, a drunken mistake. But you feel a cold dread that has nothing to do with the coming winter. You know the story they will tell is a lie. 2 weeks later, the dread finds a name. You are in the scriptorium, the smell of vellum and drying ink a familiar comfort, when the news arrives on a whisper. The king's personal physician is dead. The official word, carried on the lips of nervous courtiers, is fever, a simple, common killer. But you knew the man. You saw his work. To the world, the Duke of Burgundy is the enemy, a rival. But the king's charcoal stick bypasses the Duke's sigil entirely. It draws a new line, a shocking line, from a banker in Flanders directly to a name you recognize. A name spoken with reverence in the king's own court. A trusted advisor. The king whispers the name, a sound barely louder than the guttering candle flame. And the entire map seems to shift. The enemy isn't at the gates. The enemy is in the room next door. It is simple, he whispers, and the sound is a dry rustle, like turning the page of a forbidden book. One currency, from the English Channel to the Pyrenees, guaranteed by the crown, not the whims of 100 greedy lords. he taps a freshly drawn map. One tax, paid by all. The Duke of Burgundy's coin is no better than the baker's. Why should his purse be protected while the baker's is bled dry? This is the heresy. This is the death sentence you are all writing for yourselves. Because you stand in the market square, the stench of dung and damp wool thicken your nostrils, and you already know. You know the king is not just sick. You know he is a puppet, and you can see the strings. You feel it first in your gut, a cold dread that has nothing to do with the winter chill creeping through your thin tunic. You feel it in the price of a loaf of bread, which costs a clipped silver more than it did last week, for no reason anyone will say aloud. He presses a small, tightly rolled scroll into your palm. The wax seal is not one you recognize. Your blood runs cold. With a tremor you cannot hide, you break it. The brittle crack of the wax is like a bone snapping. The message inside is not in your cipher. It's in plain French, the script elegant and cruel. It details the exact route your children are meant to take in 2 days' time. And at the bottom, there is no signature. Just a small, simple drawing. A single, perfectly rendered wolf. Today, we see state actors use targeted disinformation campaigns, flooding social media with lies to destabilize a population and make them question the very nature of reality. The Dukes of Burgundy and Orléans were pioneers of this. They didn't use algorithms, they used alchemy. They conducted the world's first successful psychological and chemical warfare campaign against the head of a state, gaslighting not just a man, but an entire nation. They made a whole country believe its divinely appointed leader was broken, that his reality was a lie. The numbers in the ledger prove how they did it. The air fills with the smell of roasting meat and burning pitch. A smell so vile, it coats the back of your throat. Two of the men, now living pillars of fire, break from the chain and run into the crowd, setting ladies' dresses alight. The party dissolves into a stampede of raw panic, but in the heart of the chaos, your eyes are drawn back to Louis of Orléans. And this is the secret. This is the truth that the sole surviving knight would only confess on his deathbed 4 centuries later. 2 funerals were held that autumn, one for a king and the other for the truth. The air in Paris grows thin and cold as they bury King Charles VI. You watch from a distance as the soil, dark and heavy, falls upon the royal coffin. A kingdom holds its breath, not in grief, but in a long, shuddering sigh of relief. The madness is over. 30 years of a king who believed he was made of glass, who would howl like a wolf through the halls of the Hôtel St. Paul, has finally ended. The crown passes. The future begins. It's a dark mirror to how, centuries from now, investigators will track shell corporations and dark money through digital ledgers to find who truly pulls the strings of power. The king is not a monarch succumbing to lunacy. He is the first forensic accountant of his own murder. He is mapping the anatomy of the conspiracy against him, connecting the dots of treason that are paid for, not with blood, but with wool futures and trade tariffs. What shatters your assumptions isn't the conspiracy itself, but the cold, brilliant logic of it. The air is thick with the competing smells of damp stone, beeswax, and the sharp, acidic scent of ink still drying on vellum. Your name doesn't matter. You are the son of a clerk, a merchant, a man who works with his hands and his mind, not his sword. And you are committing treason. Across the heavy oak table, Jean de Montaigu leans into the flickering candlelight. His face, a landscape of shadows and fierce intelligence. He isn't a duke or a baron. His power comes from the numbers he can conjure, the laws he can write. They buried the truth about you. They painted you in shades of mud and ignorance, a mindless cog in a feudal machine, a sheep waiting for a wolf. But 99% of people don't know the most dangerous secret of the Middle Ages. You were not ignorant. You were informed. And your information network, a forbidden web of whispers and signs, was often faster and more accurate than the king's own galloping messengers. The nobles scheme in their cold stone towers, believing their secrets are safe behind portcullis and guards. They are wrong. It's not a kingdom you're trying to save anymore. It is a desperate, frantic triage to preserve what little is left of the country your husband's family is tearing apart with their greed. You are not the villain of this story. You are the only adult left in the room. A soft knock on the door. Not a guard. This knock is different. It is the signal you've been dreading. One of your most trusted agents, a merchant who carries your secrets in the false bottom of a wine cask, slips into the room. He doesn't meet your eyes. Minute, carefully administered doses of lead compounds and ergot, the very same fungus from which we derive LSD. These didn't just kill you, they unmade you slowly. They induced crippling paranoia, vivid hallucinations, violent, uncontrollable rages. They mimicked insanity so perfectly that no one would ever suspect a human hand at work. It was the perfect crime, buried under the guise of family concern, as the dukes publicly wept for their beloved king. This is a truth that feels disturbingly modern. For a frozen second, nothing happens. Then, with a sound like a wet whoosh, one of the wild men ignites. The flame doesn't just burn him, it consumes him, crawling up his body in a sickening wave of fire. His feathers turn to black, incandescent ash in an instant. His scream is a sound you will never forget, high and sharp and utterly inhuman, before it is cut short. Then a second dancer catches fire from the first, and a third. The room becomes a furnace of screaming, melting flesh. But the real crime wasn't the theft of a crown. It was the theft of a king's will, and the person who orchestrated it is still hidden. Their own signature, nowhere to be found on the page. He knows the armies of his ambitious cousin, the Duke of Burgundy, are not funded by prayer and fealty. They are funded by the looms of Bruges and Ghent, which spin English wool into gold. Burgundy controls the money, and therefore he controls the swords pointed at your king's throat. The lines of charcoal on the map become a web. A merchant's house in London, a moneylender in Antwerp, a shipping magnate in Calais. The men who could have saved the kingdom were not just executed, they were erased. History gives them a single scornful line: the marmosets, low-born upstarts who flew too close to the sun. But what they don't want you to know is that they weren't purged for their ambition. They were purged for an idea, a secret so dangerous it had to be extinguished with fire and steel. You are in a room that doesn't officially exist, carved from the cold guts of a Paris cellar beneath a draper's shop. The king is silent, but the room is not empty. Your hand tightens on the shaft of your spear, the wood slick with sweat. The door is locked and barred from your side. You are the only one with the key, and you realize, with a terror that turns your blood to ice, you haven't locked the king in for his own protection. You've locked him in with the thing he fears most. They didn't just disagree with you, they had to erase you. You pause, the quill hovering over the page. A floorboard creaks in the hall. You don't breathe. Your fingers tighten, the sharp edge of a signet ring digging into your skin. Is it a guard on his rounds, or is it one of Burgundy's spies? The line between the two has blurred into non-existence. You know they are watching. You know that one misplaced letter, one captured messenger, one loyal servant who breaks under torture is all it takes for this hidden government of yours to collapse. Every time a large sum was paid to the Florentine, the king's sanity violently collapsed within days. This is the secret that changes everything. The battle for France wasn't being fought on a field, but in the king's own blood. The forbidden art of the era wasn't a poison that brought a quick death. That was for commoners. The true art, the one reserved for kings, was the poison of the mind. Toxicologists examining medieval apothecary notes have found the recipes. They weren't just poisons, they were sophisticated neurotoxins. Everyone knows about the costumes. Everyone can smell the pitch. But no one moves. No one shouts a warning. This is the moment you will replay in your mind for years. The silence where a word could have saved them. It is a silence so deep and so absolute, it feels deliberate. Orleans stumbles forward, holding his torch aloft to get a better look at the wild men, to guess which one is his brother, the king. He leans in close, too close. A spark. It's a tiny, insignificant thing, a fleck of orange against the dark, sticky linen. Every battle that followed, every village burned, every young man who died in a muddy field for the next 30 years did so under the legal shadow of this document. It is a masterpiece of treason, not written in blood, but in something far more insidious. Ink, weaponized by lies. The signature isn't proof of consent. It's the ghost of a stolen mind, a faint cry for help that no one could hear. The French crown has been taken. The Dauphin is now a fugitive. And a foreign king sits on the throne. His finger, frail and trembling, moves from the sheep-grazing fields of England, across the violent gray of the Channel, and into the bustling ports of Flanders. He's following the wool. He is tracing the flow of power. This is the forbidden truth that history buries under heroic myths. 99% of people believe medieval wars were won with chivalrous knights and impregnable castles. The secret that men were killed for whispering is that wars were won with shiploads of fleece and bags of silver. Your king, in his supposed madness, understands this better than any man alive. It's why there's a second, more desperate plan known only to you and the king. A plan that doesn't involve psychology, but a quiet horror hidden in the English baggage train, just waiting for the command. The whispers have stopped. You've heard what you were never supposed to hear. You are no longer just a guard. You are a witness. To speak of this would be treason, or worse. They would simply say the king's madness was contagious. You would be the one locked away. You are trapped, just as he is. Suddenly, a new sound from inside the room. It's not the king. It's a faint, dry scraping. The sound of rough cloth brushing against stone. It comes from the corner of the room. From behind the great tapestry depicting a forgotten battle. A politician fighting a war on a dozen fronts. The letters show you playing the dukes against each other with breathtaking audacity, feeding one's ambition with false promises while secretly funding his rival's army. It's the oldest trick of institutional power, a tactic of political character assassination we still see today. When you cannot defeat an opponent, you destroy their reputation for posterity. you paint the strategist as a slut, the protector as a traitor, the powerful woman as a monster. Because a woman who can wield power like a man threatens the very foundation of their world. An accountant for the Duke of Burgundy, his face illuminated by a single flickering candle, is dipping his pen in ink. He marks a new entry, not under weapons or espionage, but under household expenses. The entry is deceptively simple: a large payment to a Florentine apothecary for rare spices and medicinal compounds. The date on the ledger? Today, the day the king's mind shattered again. This wasn't an isolated incident. Historians for centuries dismissed these ledgers as mundane. But when modern analysts cross-reference the dates of these payments, a horrifying pattern emerged. This party, this dance, is supposed to be a jolt of joyous madness to scare away the demons in his head. But as you watch the feathered men caper and shriek, you realize the demons aren't in his head. They're in this hall with you. Then the doors swing open, admitting a blast of cold January air that does nothing to cut the tension. It's the king's own brother, Louis of Orleans, and his uncle, the Duke of Berry. They are late. Was she the evil queen? Or was she a hostage, her signature coerced, her reputation offered up as the perfect scapegoat to obscure an even darker truth? The history books give you a simple villain. The ink tells a story of a complex conspiracy. This one piece of paper rerouted the river of a nation's history. It declared the rightful heir a bastard, and a stranger the legitimate king. It promised peace, but was, in reality, a declaration of total war against anyone who refused to accept the lie. You can hear the sound that anchors him to this world, the dry, dusty scrape of a charcoal stick as it drags across the stiff vellum, a sound like fingernails on a tombstone. The air in the chamber is thick with the scent of melting beeswax and the faint, sweet decay of old parchment. Your king isn't staring into nothingness. His eyes, in these stolen moments of clarity, are alive with a terrifying fire. He is tracing lines, not the borders of countries or the paths of rivers, but something else entirely, something invisible to everyone but him. You've handed them the script for their own destruction. Now, all your king has to do is march his men onto the stage and let them play their parts. But as you fold the parchment, a cold thought grips you. A plan this precise relies on the enemy behaving as predicted. It relies on their chaos. What if, by some miracle, the headless beast grows ahead? What if one of those proud dukes, in a moment of clarity, unites the French against you? This is the fear that truly keeps you awake. This is the haunting parallel to our own world. He was a whistleblower, trying to warn his court of the conspiracy that was swallowing him whole. But his captors had already perfected their narrative. They had convinced everyone that he was no longer a credible witness to his own life. His truth was dismissed as a symptom. His reality was labeled delusion. They convinced the world he was insane, making it impossible for him to name the very people driving him mad. You pull back from the door, the cold of the stone seeping into your bones. You are writing to a banker in Lombardy, negotiating a loan the treasury knows nothing about. Not for jewels, but for bread and steel. For mercenaries to guard the roads so your children can be moved to a secure fortress far from the grasping hands of the Duke of Burgundy. This is the secret that was buried until 2003, when a set of your letters, believed lost to time, was discovered in the damp basement of a German monastery. When the numeric cipher was finally cracked, it didn't reveal a treacherous adulteress. It revealed a spy master. But 99% of people, then and now, get the story wrong. They see the madness, but they miss the method. They see a tragic king, not a targeted victim. What they don't want you to know is that while the king screamed, in a small, cold accounting office miles away, a different story was being written. Listen, can you hear it? Under the screams and the chaos, there's another sound. It's the quiet, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch of a quill on vellum. The heat from the torches and bodies makes your own skin feel clammy. You can hear the faint, dry scrape of the feathers against the stone floor, a sound like 1,000 dying insects. You look at the faces of the courtiers watching. Some are laughing, their mouths wide and dark in the flickering light. Others just stare, their eyes glassy, caught in the same ugly trance as you. You know the king's mind is a fragile thing, a pane of glass already spiderwebbed with cracks. The Treaty of Troyes is no longer an act of diplomacy, however brutal. It is the notarized conclusion to a 20-year-long psychological coup. It is the medieval equivalent of a hacked election, of a falsified intelligence report used to justify a war that would rage for another 3 decades. The true horror isn't a king's madness. It's the calculated sanity of those who exploited it. You can almost feel the chill in the stone chamber where it happened. The conspirators watching, their hearts pounding, as the sick king is manipulated into forfeiting a nation. Queen Isabeau's role suddenly shifts. They called your king mad, but the most dangerous secret in the kingdom wasn't his madness, it was his sanity. From the dark corridor, you watch him through the crack in the heavy oak door. The courtiers whisper that his mind is a shattered thing, a broken chalice. They see him hunched over his great table for hours, a vacant stare fixed on the maps spread before him. Another descent into the fog, but you see what they don't. You are closer. Use their own media, their own platforms to amplify the discord. Turn neighbor against neighbor, politician against politician, until the entire country is a snake eating its own tail, too consumed by internal rot to notice the enemy at the gate. The English didn't need algorithms to weaken France from within. They just needed to understand the timeless, destructive power of human ego. Agincourt wasn't a battle. It was the autopsy, the final, sultant, bloody symptom of a kingdom that had been deliberately, expertly poisoned at its head. You lean back, the letter finished. The plan is in motion. They were literally weaponizing sound to keep the king teetering on the edge of sanity. It was the perfect crime, an assassination of the mind that left no visible wound. And the face that is not a face? Imagine the king, strapped to his bed, his mind fractured by sound, and a figure approaches. He's wearing one of the bizarre beaked masks of a plague doctor, or perhaps a simple leather mask to hide his identity. A physician, a court rival, a tormentor. To the king's broken mind, he is a featureless monster, a walking nightmare. They see a vacant throne and a weak foreign queen. They don't see the strategist. Tonight, you dip your quill. The sound is a delicate, dry scratch against the vellum, a sound only you can hear over the frantic beating of your own heart. Scrape, 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 an ASMR whisper of treason and survival. Each number you write corresponds to a letter, a complex cipher of your own design, a language of shadows that allows you to speak the truth in a court built on lies. He overturns the heavy oak table, sending silver plates and goblets crashing to the stone floor. The sharp, metallic clang echoes in the sudden silence, a sound that will live in your ears for weeks. You feel a cold dread creep up your spine, the same primal fear you felt as a child when you were told stories of demons who wear human skin. The king is screaming about assassins in the walls, about poison in the very air he breathes. He is, they will later say, lost to God, mad. Before you, a nightmare unfolds. 6 figures, including the King of France himself, are disguised as wild men of the forest. Their costumes are grotesque, made of linen sacks stitched directly onto their skin, soaked in sticky, flammable pitch, and then rolled in a thick coat of feathers. They leap and howl, their movements jerky and manic, a mockery of a dance for a court that has grown bored with simple pleasures. It feels profoundly wrong. Every instinct screams that you are not watching a party. You are watching a ritual, and the ink of the king's signature doesn't perfectly match the ink of the text it's supposed to be authenticating. It whispers a forbidden possibility. The sound of that possibility is a single, wet scrape of a quill on a blank sheet of vellum, held before a king in a rare moment of lucidity. He is asked to sign, perhaps told it's a minor land grant, a household expense, anything to placate him. And in that moment, his signature becomes a weapon, waiting for his enemies to write the terms of surrender around it. This changes everything. They are not just lying to you about a piece of glass in a box. They are lying to you about the very nature of God, selling you a counterfeit key to a heaven they control. And as you watch the procession turn the corner towards the palace, a chilling question forms in your mind, a question more terrifying than any demon in the fog. If the most sacred object in the kingdom is a lie, what else is? To turn their pride into a weapon they wield against themselves. You write the words that will seal their fate, the ink sinking into the fibers of the page. Provoke their pride, you scratch, the words stark and black, for their house is without a master, and they will fall upon each other before they fall upon us. It's a masterclass in psychological warfare, a truth that feels disturbingly modern. It's the same playbook a foreign power uses today, isn't it? Not with invading armies, but with an invisible invasion of the mind. Find the fractures in a nation, in a forgotten chronicle, buried by the church for its inconvenient truths. A monk named Michel Pinton recorded these moments of clarity. He wrote that the king would weep and beg for forgiveness, not for his madness, but for his inability to make them understand. What the court physicians called delusions were fragmented memories. The poison in the music wasn't a metaphor. 99% of people have no idea that medieval courts were experimenting with psychological warfare. Certain musical rhythms and discordant frequencies, known to agitators and torturers, could induce anxiety, paranoia, and even psychosis. Your ladies-in-waiting believe you are grieving, or praying, or indulging in vanity. They see a woman surrounded by silks and jewels. They don't see the maps hidden beneath the tapestries, or the coded ledgers disguised as prayer books. They cannot feel the cold knot of fear in your stomach, a feeling so constant it has become a part of you. Your husband, the King of France, is a ghost in his own castle. His mind is a shattered kingdom, and in its ruins, The great dukes, your cousins, your rivals, your predators, circle like wolves. And then it happens. His laugh hitches. It curdles in his throat. His eyes, a moment ago so full of life, widen into glassy orbs of pure terror. He doesn't see you. He doesn't see his queen or his powerful cousins, the Dukes of Burgundy and Orleans, who rush to his side with performative concern. He sees something else, something slithering out of the rushes on the floor, something with too many limbs, dripping with river filth. He screams, a sound not fit for a king, but for an animal in a trap. They will tell you it was an accident, a party that went too far, a tragic miscalculation. But 99% of people who hear the official story of the Bal des Ardents never learn the secret that was buried for 400 years. They never hear about the smile. You are there, in the Hôtel Saint-Paul in Paris, and the air is so thick you could drown in it. It's a foul cocktail of spilled wine, the sweat of 100 unwashed bodies, and something else, a high-strung, dark intensity with whole stories from this delicious meal. Metallic tension that has nothing to do with a celebration. But what if it's something else entirely? What 99% of people will never learn is that a document like this is a time capsule of its own creation. To the naked eye, it's just ink on parchment. But to a modern forensic analyst, it's a crime scene. Advanced chemical analysis, a science that would have seemed like black magic in 1420, can deconstruct the very composition of the ink. It can distinguish one batch mixed on a Monday with a specific ratio of iron gall and wine from another batch mixed on a Wednesday. As the reliquary passes, a ray of weak sunlight breaks through the Parisian gloom, catching the gold. For a moment, it blinds you. And in that moment of darkness, a cold realization washes over you. This isn't about faith. It isn't about salvation or healing. You look at the face of the bishop walking beside the artifact. There is no divine light in his eyes. There is only the hard, satisfied look of a merchant who has cornered the market on hope. This is a spiritual betrayal of the highest order. This is the secret 99% of people will never learn about: the famous victory at Agincourt. England's greatest ally was the French king's own insanity. Your spies also speak of the dukes, Orleans, Burgundy, vultures circling a throne that is occupied but empty. They despise each other more than they despise your king, Henry. Their hatred is a fever in the French court, a sickness more virulent than any plague. And your task, as you dip the quill back into the ink, is not to cure it. It is to feed it. You hold your breath, your own blood roaring in your ears. The whisper comes again, closer this time, desperate. There is a face that is not a face. It watches from behind the tapestry. Then, nothing but the sound of quiet, desperate weeping. The sound isn't of madness. It's the sound of a prisoner who has given up hope of ever being understood. The wet, soft sound of tears hitting the cold stone floor on the other side of the door. This is the secret that changes everything. But what they don't want you to know is that the story they wrote is a lie, a carefully crafted cage of ink and slander designed to imprison your legacy. 99% of people will believe it forever. The air in your private chamber is thick with the ghosts of secrets. You can smell them. The sweet, heavy scent of beeswax from the 100 letters you've sealed this month, each one a thread in a web only you can see. And beneath it, the faint, sharp tang of Iron Gall ink, the very ink that writes you into history as a traitor. A most terrifying weapon in the war for France isn't a trebuchet or a blade. It's carried in a velvet pouch by a man who smells of cloves and deceit. A man whose name will never be recorded next to a king's. You are standing in the great hall, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and roasting boar. Tapestries depicting glorious hunts and pious saints absorb the sound, making the room feel both vast and suffocating. King Charles VI, the man they call the Beloved, is laughing, a goblet of Burgundy's finest in his hand. Jean, the scribe who whispered the word poison, was pulled from the Seine 2 days ago. His lungs were full of water, his pockets full of stones. They called it a suicide, a man overcome by melancholy. The Duke gives you the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. It is not a greeting, it is an acknowledgement, an answer to a question you were too terrified to ask. And in that silent, final gesture, you understand with chilling clarity that your life is now measured in the time it takes to arrange another unfortunate accident. They lied about the past, sanitizing a sophisticated conspiracy into a simple story of madness. And it forces you to ask the most important question of all. What other blueprints are they hiding? What else are they lying about right now? History tells you to blame the Queen, Isabeau of Bavaria, casting her as the villainess who betrayed her own blood. But what they don't want you to know is that the real villain isn't a person. It's the document itself. Lean closer. Let your breath mist the cold glass. Look past the elegant, confident script of the clerks and find the king's signature. Charles. It's a wounded thing. A spidery, hesitant scrawl that seems to tremble with a pain that has outlived the flesh. You're told this is the signature of a man lost to psychosis. It's the same spiritual grift you see in the modern world. The televangelist selling blessed water from a garden hose. The wellness guru peddling unproven supplements for the price of a month's rent. The church isn't offering a cure. It's monetizing a crisis. They have taken the king's very real, very human suffering and turned it into the year's biggest marketing campaign. The gold of that box could feed this entire crowd for a year. The cost of this single procession could rebuild the rotting tenements you all call home. You know this because your spies are not just soldiers. They are serving girls who overhear pillow talk, priests who listen to confessions, merchants who trade in rumor as much as silk. They tell you of King Charles, the Beloved, who now believes his bones are made of glass. A king who shrieks if someone approaches too quickly, convinced he will shatter into 1,000 pieces. How do you lead an army when you believe you are an object? You don't. You become a symbol of your kingdom's own fragility. You press your ear against the rough-hewn oak of the door, the splinters digging into your skin, and you listen. The silence is broken by a sound so unexpected it makes the heart seize in your chest. A whisper. It's his voice. Not the high, frantic shriek of the madman, but the low, urgent tone of the king you once knew. A voice sane and lucid and filled with an ancient terror. They put poison in the music, he breathes, his words a ghost against the wood. It untunes the soul. They tell you the queen is a villain, a foreign whore who sold France for a string of pearls and the warmth of another man's bed. They write it in their chronicles, whisper it in the cold halls of power, and teach it to children for the next 600 years. Because history is not a record of what happened, it is a story told by the winners, and you, Isabeau of Bavaria, are losing. Her grandmother's words are a prayer in her mind, a science far older than the university doctors. She knows the penalty for this cure is the stake. They would call it witchcraft. But as she wraps the potent mash in a strip of clean linen, she knows the penalty for doing nothing is the soul of her king, and perhaps the soul of the entire kingdom. The real poison isn't in an herb, it's in the crown, and she is about to risk the fire to prove it. Her powerlessness is a mirror of your own. And then it happens. The Duke of Burgundy's gaze, cold and heavy as a crypt door, sweeps across the hall. He sees you watching him. He sees you glance from the whimpering king to the queen's white-knuckled hands. He sees you, and in his eyes, you see a flicker of recognition, a connection being made. There is no anger. There is no threat. There is only a cold reptilian stillness, a quiet calculation, as if he is measuring a piece of wood for a coffin. You use your platforms to paint a Mad King narrative around anyone who challenges the official story. You use fear to sell cures that only grant you more control. You use an avalanche of information and disinformation to make people question their own reality until they feel as fragile, as breakable, as a man who believes he is made of glass. The technology has been refined, but the principle is identical. The story of Charles VI is not a fairy tale from a distant, dark age. It is a warning. The destiny of a kingdom can be undone with a single drop of ink. And for France, this is the ink that poisoned the future. You are standing in a climate-controlled room, a place of profound silence, looking at the instrument of that poisoning, the Treaty of Troyes. It rests behind thick, protective glass, a 600-year-old sheet of vellum that smells faintly of dust and forgotten secrets. History tells you this document is a tragedy. A mad king, Charles VI, disinheriting his own son and handing his nation to his greatest enemy, King Henry V of England. Over 80% of the so-called first-century artifacts, splinters of the True Cross, vials of the Virgin Mary's milk, bones of the apostles, were medieval forgeries. They weren't just fakes, they were mass-produced. This tear of Mary Magdalene? It's likely a polished piece of rock crystal, bought from a Venetian merchant who sells 100 more just like it. You hear the sharp clink of a silver coin dropping into the priest's collection box, a sound that cuts through the prayers like a shard of glass. This is the real transaction. The sound of your quill is a dry, frantic scratching, like fingernails on a coffin lid. You can smell the metallic tang of fear on your own breath, mixed with the beeswax of the seal you will soon press into this letter. This is the real war, not the clash of steel, but the silent, patient poisoning of an enemy's mind. And the mind of France is already sick. Your breath fogs in the torchlight, and the heavy wool of your livery scratches at your neck, a constant nagging reminder of your place. Your world is this 10-yard stretch of polished stone outside the king's chambers. Most nights are the same. You hear the howls, the sound of a man who believes he is made of glass, screaming that he will shatter if anyone touches him. But tonight is different. The silence is what scares you. A silence so deep, it feels heavier than stone. His lips part, and a voice like the scraping of bone on stone fills the silence. A whisper that sinks into your marrow. "It isn't me," he rasps. His words not for you, but for the shadows that listen from the corners. "It was never me." A single tear traces a path through the grime on his cheek. The flaw, the crack in the glass. It came with the Templar gold. He shudders, a tremor that you fear will break him. It's buried with them. The real story is happening in the margins, in the whispers, in the knowledge passed down from mother to daughter. The forbidden knowledge isn't just about herbs. It's the terrifying truth that the very institutions meant to save you are often the architects of your suffering. But in the flickering shadows of the royal scullery, far from the king's chamber, a different kind of medicine is being prepared. A serving girl, her face pale with determination, crushes a dark, fragrant root between two stones. They aren't just breaking a king, they're manufacturing consent for a coup, crafting a new reality where they hold all the strings, and the official story is whatever serves them best. Your eyes drift to the queen, Isabeau of Bavaria. She sits frozen, her face a mask of porcelain perfection, but her knuckles are white where she grips the arms of her chair. She knows. Of course she knows. But she is a woman, a foreigner, a political pawn herself. To speak the truth would not save her husband. It would only sign her own death warrant. They made him see himself as fragile, transparent, a king who could be seen through and easily broken. That was their victory. This is the secret they never wanted you to find because the blueprint is too valuable. It is still in use. What they don't want you to know is that this medieval strategy is the bedrock of the world you live in now. How do you control a people? You don't need armies when you can manufacture a crisis. You find a crack in the public mind, economic anxiety, social division, a deep distrust, and you pour poison into it. He closes his eyes, leaning into your touch, soothed by the lie. But as you hold him, you glance towards the heavy tapestry that covers the doorway. A sliver of light from the hall beyond is suddenly blocked. A shadow. Someone is listening. You feel a familiar, metallic taste in your mouth, the taste of pure, absolute fear. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat that says one thing. You have been heard. You feel it too, a flicker of want, a desire to believe that a piece of heaven can fix a broken earth. But 99% of people, then and now, have no idea of the sheer scale of this lie. It's a multi-million ducat industry, a spiritual pyramid scheme with God at the top. The truth, buried for centuries, is that when 20th century scientists finally got to carbon date the most sacred relics in Europe's grandest cathedrals, they uncovered a shocking conspiracy. They told you the battle was won with arrows. A lie. It was won with a whisper, planted in the ear of a madman months before the first English soldier ever felt French mud squelch beneath his boot. The candle gutters. Your shadow, a looming giant, dances against the cold stone walls. It's late. The kind of late where the air itself feels thin and old. You are Sir Thomas Walsingham, the king's ear in the dark, and your weapon is not a sword, but this ink, this parchment, this secret. The history books tell you King Charles VI of France went mad. They call it his glass delusion, a simple, clean story of a mind that shattered. But 99% of what you've been told is a carefully constructed lie, designed to hide a terrifying truth. The madness wasn't the disease, it was the cage. And the sane man trapped inside was whispering the names of his assassins. You are the lone guard. The stone hallway is a tomb of cold air and long shadows. He feels the gaze of God, checking for fractures. He is the living embodiment of a secret everyone in power knows, but no one dares to speak. That their power is a story they tell themselves, a beautiful, elaborate, and fragile lie. After what feels like an eternity, his head turns. The movement is slow, agonizing, accompanied by the faint, dry crackle of stiff brocade. His eyes, clear and lucid, find yours across the dusty room. There is no insanity in them. There is only a soul-crushing certainty. His madness was convenient for his political rivals, who could rule in his name. His suffering was profitable for the church, which could sell an endless supply of prayers and exorcisms for his recovery. They had a vested interest in his pain. The king lets out a sharp cry as the physician applies the caustic lye to his head. You can hear the faint sizzle as it touches his skin. The smell of burning hair now joins the toxic perfume of the room. This is the official story of healing, the one written by the powerful. It is a lie. You were taught that a king's word is law, his body sacred, anointed by God himself. This is the great lie they use to keep the world in order. You are learning the most forbidden truth of power. A king's body is just another battlefield. His mind is a territory to be conquered. His sanity, a fortress to be besieged not with trebuchets and swords, but with subtle tinctures and terrifying whispers. It's the same dark art practiced in secret today, a psychological warfare that makes the victim complicit in their own destruction. They managed it. The poison was the entire system, 1,000 daggers of the mind. It was the apocalyptic fear preached from the pulpit, the psychological torment from the family who swore to protect him, the cold political isolation by his own counsel. It was the strange tinctures from the apothecaries, a fog of chemicals to match the fog in his head. They methodically shattered his reality to seize his kingdom. And the glass delusion, that wasn't a tragedy. It was the horrifyingly perfect result. If they ever discovered the truth, that you are an agent for the embattled Armonach faction, fighting a covert war from the king's own bedchamber, they wouldn't just kill you. They would unmake you. They would call you a spy, a harlot, a witch, and the slow-burning pyre would be a mercy. The king stirs. His gaze focuses on you, a brief, terrifying moment of clarity. Odette, he breathes, a voice, a dry rasp. He trusts you, and in that trust lies your salvation and your damnation. You are living a life no one will ever get to finish reading. And the church, in its infinite wisdom, has decided the cure lies not in medicine, but in marketing. This procession isn't for the king, it's for you. It's a performance to reinforce who holds the real power when even a crown offers no protection from the terrors of the mind. You can feel the hope in the crowd. It's a palpable, frantic energy. A mother holds up her feverish child, his skin pale as milk. An old man with clouded eyes reaches a trembling hand into the air, as if he could physically touch the holiness passing by. And you left warnings for us, etched into the very foundations of their world, just waiting for someone to finally look down. And you have to wonder, how many of history's divine acts were just the work of a hidden hand, moving pieces on a board you never even knew existed? It's the corporation obsessed with its brand purity, terrified that a single scandal could shatter its public image and evaporate billions in stock value. It's the powerful family meticulously curating their history, erasing the inconvenient relatives and burying the shameful secrets, creating a flawless facade that is one investigative journalist away from ruin. The king's mind is simply the first to crack under a pressure the entire system was built upon. He isn't mad. He is the canary in the coal mine of the monarchy. He feels the weight of 100 ancestors on his glass shoulders. They were wiping out centuries of practical, effective medicine to consolidate their own power. They needed you to believe that only a priest's prayer, bought with a silver coin, could save you. A healthy populace has no need for paid miracles. It's a ghost that haunts us still. The modern echo of a system that sees more profit in managing sickness than in providing a cure. The quiet, systemic suppression of any treatment, any wisdom that threatens the profits of those who sell the official remedy. They didn't want the king well. As he passed you in the corridor, you heard it, the faint, almost musical clink of glass vials nestled in velvet. An ASMR quality sound of death in the making. Now, the king's humors are made of glass and terror. The church calls it a demon, a convenient explanation that requires expensive exorcisms and enriches their coffers. But one of the queen's scribes, a quiet man named Jean, used a different word in the scriptorium. He leaned close, the smell of ink and fear on his breath, and whispered it, poison. So what is the final, forbidden truth of the sad story of King Charles VI? The secret they buried under centuries of psalms and stone is not that he was poisoned. It's that his mind was perfected. The revelation isn't a single substance in a cup. It's the blueprint. Charles wasn't just a victim. He was the testing ground for a new and silent kind of warfare. State-sponsored gaslighting, honed to a terrible art. His madness, whether natural or induced, was weaponized. Every faction, the ambitious dukes, the whispering church, the watching enemies of France, they didn't just stumble upon an opportunity. Sometimes it's a quiet word in a dark room. Sometimes it's a woman's intelligence, so potent and threatening that society has no choice but to repackage it as something supernatural, something divine. They cannot fathom that a woman could be a political operative of such skill, so they call you a miracle. It's the same way they dismiss a female herbalist's knowledge as witchcraft. Your mind is your greatest asset and your most profound crime. Before you, a golden box, a reliquary so bright it hurts to look at, is held aloft. Inside, they say, is a tear shed by Mary Magdalene at the foot of the cross. A single crystallized drop of divine sorrow, paraded through the city as the ultimate charm, the holy cure for a king who believes he is made of glass. Your king, Charles VI, shatters in his mind. He screams that his bones will break if anyone touches him. He forgets his own name. He runs howling through the halls of his own palace. The serpent and the wolf devour the lily. The serpent, the sigil of the ambitious Duke of Orleans. The wolf, a known symbol for the powerful Duke of Burgundy. And the lily, the symbol of the French king. It wasn't a prophecy. It was a headline, a hidden, permanent news report carved by a ghost. It was your report, and it proves the one thing the powerful have tried for centuries to erase. You knew. You were always watching. He doesn't know his agony is being used as a key to unlock the treasury, to move armies, to rewrite laws. His suffering is the ink with which they sign their treaties. And as the priest's voice reaches its crescendo, promising fire and damnation, you realize the most terrifying truth of all. The curse is real, but it wasn't sent from God to punish a king. It was created by men to control a nation. One ancestor with a questionable birth, One politically inconvenient marriage 2 centuries ago. One genetic flaw passed down through the generations, and the entire illusion of divine right could shatter. The dynasty's claim to God's favor would be exposed as a fraud. Charles is not seeing a fragile body. He is seeing the truth of his entire existence. His mind has become a mirror, reflecting the crushing anxiety of his class. It's the very same fear you see today. Hidden in plain sight, because a simple woman, an herbalist in a village, who could ease a fever with willow bark or calm a fit with lavender, was performing a miracle without the church. She was healing the body without selling a prayer to save the soul. She was competition, and the church does not tolerate competition. Parish records, the ones they didn't burn, show a 70% increase in women being tried for witchcraft, who were known to be healers during this exact period. It wasn't a purge of black magic. It was an intellectual genocide. What they don't want you to know is that this madness is a meticulously crafted poison administered by the very men who now wring their hands in theatrical sorrow. 99% of the people in this room, from the lowest page to the highest-ranking baron, believe they are witnessing a royal tragedy. You know you are witnessing the perfect crime. You remember the Duke of Burgundy's physician, the one with eyes that never leave the floor. He was here last week, his leather satchel carrying a new restorative tonic for the king's fragile humors. The physician was a man of science in an age of faith, and he knew that the most resilient truths are not written in ink. They are carried in the blood. And now, you are the one holding the last, undiluted drop of a king's murdered sanity. A flicker of lucidity in the storm of his mind. You lean close, your lips near his ear, your breath a warm cloud in the cold air. The court sees intimacy. They see a lover's whisper. What you are actually saying is, the shipments to Calais, my lord. The Duke's men guard them, not yours. Remember the marmosets. Remember who was loyal. You are his last line to reality, the only voice that can still pierce the fog. This is the forbidden truth of power. It's not always wielded with a sword. What they don't want you to know about the Age of Faith is that it was built on a foundation of industrial-scale fraud. It's a secret hidden in plain sight, gleaming in gold, whispered in prayers. You stand shoulder to shoulder with the desperate masses in the muddy streets of Paris. The air is thick enough to chew, a nauseating cocktail of cloying incense, unwashed bodies, and the sour breath of sickness. Every cough, every wheeze, every ragged prayer is a note in a symphony of despair. There are marks here. They aren't tool marks. They aren't random graffiti. They are symbols. It's the moral panic over new ideas, new technologies, new people, designed to make a frightened population hand over its power to any institution that screams salvation loud enough. They manufacture a spiritual crisis to seize political control. You look up at the priest, his face contorted in righteous fury, and you suddenly see him for what he is, not a man of God, but a master of fear. The king, locked away in his chambers, hears only the phantoms in his own mind. He doesn't hear the whispers in the papal court. He isn't afraid for his body. He is afraid for the bloodline. The secret the church and the nobility fought to bury for 1,000 years was the terrifying fragility of blood purity. You see, they told the world that royal blood was a divine substance, a liquid pact with God himself that granted them the right to rule. But they knew the truth. They knew that their claim was as brittle as spun glass. In secret medical texts, forbidden books like the Circa Instans, The knowledge was there, copied by hand in hushed monasteries before being declared heretical. Valerian root to calm the frantic heart. St. John's wort to lift the suffocating blanket of melancholy. Simple plants growing in any castle garden that we now know have real, verifiable neurological effects. A page in a book held the key to the king's sanity. But that book was a threat. They are two wolves in the guise of sheepdogs, and the flock has no idea the shepherd is their next meal. Glass, the king whispers, the word tearing from his throat. He shrinks from his own brother's touch. I am made of glass. Do not touch me. If you touch me, I will shatter into 1,000 pieces. This is the official story, the one whispered in the confessionals and proclaimed from the pulpits, a divine madness, a punishment from God for some unknown sin. But as you turn to leave, your boot scuffs against a loose floorboard near the hearth, a faint, hollow sound. Driven by an impulse you don't understand, you kneel, your fingernails scraping against the rough, splintered wood. You pry it up, and there, nested in the dark space below, is not a book. It is not a scroll. It is a small, lead-stoppered vial of dark, thick glass. It feels cold in your palm. They burned the records. They buried the doctor. They thought they had erased every word he ever wrote. But they forgot one thing. A list of appointments to key garrisons, all men loyal to him. 99% of the court, 99% of future historians, will see a devoted mistress comforting her broken king. They will never know that you are committing these details to memory, translating the ink on the page into a map of betrayal. They can't see the tiny rolled parchment tucked into the seam of your glove, its whisper-thin crackle against your skin, a constant reminder of the message you must pass. Your real work begins when the king has one of his moments. The hope in his face vanishes, replaced by the calm, dead certainty of a man who has just read his own final chapter. The knock on the secret door is not a polite request. It is a thunderous, splintering finality. And you realize, in the sudden, gut-wrenching cold, they haven't come for your bodies. They have come for the idea. They have come to burn the library of your minds. You are not a mason. You are not an artist. But you are a historian. You are recording the truth for a future that may never find it. 600 years pass. The city of Paris grows over you, burying your life, your fears, your secret knowledge under layers of concrete, asphalt, and time. In the 1980s, a team of archaeologists works in the damp, claustrophobic tunnels of the old sewer system near the Louvre. Their flashlights cut through the oppressive dark, illuminating centuries of grime. One of them stops, his light lingering on the massive foundation stones. Its parchment is so thin you can almost see the light through it. The ink faded to the color of a dried bruise. The strategy is laid bare, a masterpiece of political engineering. It reads, "By framing the afflictions of a monarch as divine will, we may guide his hand and the hand of his counsel toward our sacred purpose." It is a ghost that still haunts us. The playbook has never changed. It's the Red Scare that convinces a nation to trade its liberties for security. The king sits rigid, his eyes wide, fixed on a future he can see with perfect, horrifying clarity. They have sewn thin iron rods into the lining of his robes, a cage of metal to keep his fragile form from shattering. He believes that a sudden movement, a loud noise, even an accidental touch from a clumsy servant could cause him to explode into 1,000 irreparable shards. But what you are witnessing is not madness. It is a metaphor made flesh. It is the deepest, most forbidden secret of the ruling class, manifesting as a physical terror. He thrashes against the leather restraints, a low moan catching in his throat, a sound more animal than human. This isn't healing. This is torture disguised as piety. A priest stands in the corner, chanting an exorcism in a low, monotonous drone, swinging a censer that puffs useless smoke into the stale air. His words are for a demon, but the madness is in the man's blood, in the chemistry of his own mind. And what 99% of people will never learn is that a true cure was not only known, it was written down. They are scanning the faces of the court, a predator gauging the fear in its herd, calculating the precise effect of this public disintegration. On the other side of the throne, his cousin, John the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy, does not move. He is a statue carved from judgment, his face a mask of pious grief. But you see it. The corner of his mouth twitches, a flicker of a smile, so fast, so vile, it must have been a trick of the torchlight. But it wasn't. A puppet whose strings were pulled with tinctures and powders, his reign a long, slow-motion assassination. You stand in the center of the cold, empty room, a pawn in a game you are only just beginning to understand. The truth of the past is not a story of heroes and villains. It is a story of information and who gets to control it, who gets to burn the libraries, who gets to write the official cause of death. You feel a profound, hollow grief, not just for the physician, but for the very idea of truth itself. You approach him, your steps silent on the stone floor. This is the performance. You place a cool hand on his feverish brow. He flinches, but doesn't pull away. You begin to hum a simple tune from his childhood, a melody you learned from a laundress who served his mother. This is the part they see, the part the chronicles will record, the angel's work. But your mind is a razor. While you hum, your eyes scan the discarded documents on the table. A trade agreement with England, pushed by the Duke of Burgundy, a victory. You allow yourself a breath, the first easy one of the night. You imagine a world where a man is judged by his mind, not his bloodline. A world built on reason, not superstition. Then you hear it, a sound that does not belong. The scrape of a steel boot heel on the cobblestones in the alley above. Then another. It's too heavy to be the watch, too organized. The candle flame shivers, not from a draft, but as if in fear. Your eyes lock with Montague's, not on parchment that can be burned, or in a song that can be silenced, but in stone. You pull a sharpened, hardened nail from a fold in your clothes. You find a fresh foundation block, hidden in the shadows, and then you begin to carve. You hear the scrape, scrape of metal against granite, a sound that seems to tear the night in two. It's the only sound in the world. First, a serpent, coiled and ready to strike. Beside it, the snarling head of a wolf, and between them, a fragile lily, its stem broken. It is the most sophisticated protection racket in history, and its currency is your soul. But 99% of the people who shivered in that cathedral would never learn the truth. The real secret wasn't locked in the heavens. It was locked in a library in Avignon, sealed with papal wax for over 500 years, discovered by a stunned historian in the 19th century, hidden not in a vault, but cleverly bound inside the cover of a different, unimportant book, lay a papal bull, from a rival pope. This is the famous glass delusion. The history books record it as a bizarre, unfortunate anecdote. But what 99% of people will never learn is that this affliction was not random. It was a disease of the elite. Search the records. You will find no peasants, no blacksmiths, no farmers who believed their bodies were made of glass. You will only find academics, wealthy merchants, and nobles. Why? Because this was never a sickness of the body or even the mind. It was a sickness of status. His royal physicians, men in dark robes whose shadows stretch like demons in the flickering torchlight, are preparing the cure. One of them holds a ceramic bowl, and you can hear the soft, wet scrape of a wooden pestle grinding a white paste. It is a blessed ointment, they say, a holy balm to drive the sickness from his mind. But you can smell the lie in it. You can smell the lie. His scalp is already raw, weeping in places from yesterday's treatment. The laughter shatters into a sob, then a dry, rasping whisper that scrapes through the sudden silence of the court. His brother, Louis of Orleans, glides to his side, a river of shimmering blue silk and practiced concern. He places a gentle hand on the king's shoulder. "My brother, the light is too bright, the noise too great. Let us find you comfort in your chambers." His voice is a balm, a performance of love so perfect it is almost believable. But you see his eyes. They are not looking at the king. You can almost hear it, the phantom ASMR of 30 years of history crackling into ash, the soft, final hiss of a king's secret life turning to smoke and silence. They think they have succeeded. They believe the evidence is gone, the truth buried deeper than the king himself. They have scrubbed the timeline, erased the data, silenced the one man who could connect the needle to the vein. The historical fact that shatters your world isn't that a king could go mad. It's that a king could be kept perpetually, artificially mad. The air in the king's chamber is thick with the scent of stale wine, sweat, and something acridly medicinal. It clings to the tapestries, to your velvet sleeves, to the back of your throat. King Charles sits hunched in his high-backed chair, his eyes vacant, staring at a moth battering itself to death against a pane of leaded glass. His council, the powerful dukes of Burgundy and Berry, have just left, their voices still echoing with false concern and barely veiled ambition. You feel their presence like a stain in the room. For the marmosets, the platform was the king's ear, and the deplatforming was an executioner's axe. But the goal is identical: to make the challenge to the official narrative disappear, to burn the books and salt the earth where they were written. Montague takes a stick of crimson wax, melting its tip in the candle flame. The ASMR quality hiss and bubble fills the room. He lets a single, perfect drop fall onto a sealed royal decree, the one that would begin the reforms. The wax spreads, a tiny circle of blood. For a moment, it feels like a beginning. You slip out of the hovel you share with 6 other souls, your bare feet silent on the frozen mud. You make your way toward the river, toward the great, unfinished skeleton of the king's new palace, the Louvre. The moonlight is sharp and cold. Down by the water, where the massive foundation stones of the new sewer system lie waiting, you find the place. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic drum against the silence. This is more than illegal. It is a death sentence if you are caught, but the truth must be recorded. He describes your king, Charles VI, not as a man whose mind is sick, but as a vessel for God's divine anger, a living symbol of the sins of the French crown. You can hear the rustle of coarse fabric as the person next to you shifts, the wet, sharp intake of breath. A collective shiver passes through the crowd, a single, unified tremor of fear. This isn't a sermon. It's a weapon being calibrated, and you are the target. The promise is simple. Obey the church, the sole interpreter of this divine rage, and you might be saved. A single shaft of winter light cuts through the gloom, illuminating 1,000,000 dancing dust motes, each a tiny world turning in the silence. In the center of that light sits King Charles VI. He hasn't moved in 4 hours. He barely seems to breathe. You can hear the faint, dry rustle of the straw packed around his velvet chair, a buffer against the hard reality of the world. You can hear the almost imperceptible scrape of your own fingernail against the leather of your glove, a sound that feels like a blasphemy in this sacred quiet. The king's doctors weren't trying to heal him. What they don't want you to know is that they were being paid to keep him mad. You are in the room now. The air is thick with the sweet, cloying smoke of incense and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. It fails to cover the other smells: sweat, stale wine, and something acrid like burning flesh. King Charles VI sits strapped to a heavy oak chair, his eyes wide with a terror that sees things you cannot. The irony tastes like bile in your throat. Your wine, which should be sweet and spiced, is ash on your tongue. The air is thick with the smell of roasting swan, beeswax from 1,000 candles, and the damp, nervous sweat of powerful men pretending not to be afraid. Across the hall, King Charles VI sits on his gilded throne, a king in name only. His eyes, wide and unfocused, are fixed on his own hands, which he holds out as if they are foreign creatures. Spiders of flesh and bone he cannot command, not as an investigator, but as a scavenger, to collect any remaining state property. The room is cold, unnaturally so. The great wooden shelves that once held hundreds of leather-bound journals are now bare, gaping wounds in the wall. There is a faint, acrid smell beneath the lavender and herbs. It's the ghost of smoke. The metallic taste of fear coats your tongue. You run a finger along one of the empty shelves. It comes away black with a fine, greasy soot. They call you an angel. It is the most dangerous lie ever told about you. A silken cage masquerading as a pedestal. In the cold heart of the French court, a place rotting from the inside out, they tell a fairy tale of a humble young woman, Odette, whose gentle touch is the only thing that can soothe the mad king. But what historians have hidden for centuries is the secret that burns like a hot coal in your belly. You are not an angel. You are a weapon. Every word spoken here is a nail in your own coffin. The idea of peace with England, of a stable economy, it doesn't just threaten the Lord's wealth, it threatens their very purpose. What is a warrior class without a perpetual war to fight? This is the timeless tactic of power. It's not just about silencing a person. It's about making their ideas so toxic, so radioactive, that no one dares think them again for 1,000 years. It's the original cancellation. First, you discredit the expert, call him an upstart, a grifter. Then you deplatform him. It's the same fear you'd feel today, scrolling through polished headlines while the real conversations, the urgent warnings, happen in encrypted chats and anonymous forums. You understand that power doesn't need to be loud to be real. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply to know, and to make sure others know too. To bear witness when the official record is being forged in real time. That night, you cannot sleep. The knowledge is a hot coal in your belly. Light, fractured into 100 pieces of jeweled color by the stained glass windows, does not illuminate. It only makes the shadows deeper, turning the vaulted ceiling into a god's ribcage. You feel the cold of the stone floor seep through the thin leather of your shoes, a cold that feels ancient and unforgiving. From the pulpit, a man's voice is not speaking, but thundering. It's a physical force, an invisible wave that crashes against the pillars and echoes back, striking you in the chest. He doesn't use the word madness. He uses the words curse, punishment, wrath. They told the world the King of France was mad. The secret, the one they sealed in Vatican archives and erased from royal histories, is that he had suddenly become terrifyingly sane. You are standing guard in the suffocating stillness of the king's private chamber. Your job is not to protect him from assassins, but to protect him from himself. The air is thick with the sweet, cloying smell of incense and the metallic tang of old fear. As the guards drag the smoldering, twisted bodies from the hall, you know with a certainty that chills you deeper than the winter night that this was not an ending. This was their opening scene. The laughter starts again, and you feel the very air in the great hall cool and thin, as if a window to a winter tomb has been thrown open. It is not the sound of joy. It's the sound of a kingdom breaking, a high, brittle splintering that makes the hounds under the table whine and the jesters fall silent. It's a murder taking place in slow motion, and you are one of only a handful of people in this room who can hear the blade. You stand half hidden by a great wool tapestry, its threads depicting a heroic hunt.